Today, Syrian Deputy Prime Minister, head of Popular Front for Change and Liberation, visited Moscow to speak with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov about situation in Syria. At the meeting, Popular Front for Change and Liberation representatives and Russian Foreign Minister agreed on the need to an urgent dialogue between Syrian government and opposition to resolve conflict in Syria and to provide humanitarian support for Syrian people.
Я думаю, они скоро пойдут на диалог.
At the meeting with Lavrov, we have reached a common understanding that the dialogue should begin immediately, that is, today rather than tomorrow. We agreed on an urgent provision of humanitarian support for Syrian people from Russia.
During the meeting, Minister Lavrov and the Popular Front for Change and Liberation representatives discussed current situation in Syria and the prospects for crisis resolution. They emphasized the need to end violence and to start political dialogue. Dr. Jamil emphasized the National Front readiness to engage in teamwork with opposition groups interested in starting a dialogue with the government to find an acceptable political solution.
Только диалог и политический.
The conditions for such a dialogue have arrived. The results of a dialogue should be a profound political transformation, which should lead to the establishment of a modern democratic Syria. Syria in which there must be strictly observed the rights and freedoms of citizens, and all segments and groups in society should be guaranteed equal participation in political, social and economic life.
On the Russian side, Foreign Minister Lavrov said that Moscow is ready to provide all possible assistance to the organization of such dialogue. Russia's position on Syrian conflict resolution remains stable. Russia is against any foreign military intervention in Syria. In its policy towards Syria, Russia refers to the international agreement, Geneva Communiqué, which recommends an immediate end to violence and a transitional government in Syria. Margarita Bogdanova, Press TV, Moscow.
Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. Today is Tuesday, December 18th, 2012, and I'm Darko. We just saw this first video. Syrian opposition discusses cooperation with Russian foreign minister. Kind of an odd title. I'm not really sure where they were going with that. But, you know, as far as going to a democratic state, I think that's kind of the buzzword for the globalists about how they want to take over sovereign nations. They declare them dictatorships, and they say they want to impose democracy, which is a capitalist, globalist type system. And you have Syrian Islamist rebels take Aleppo infantry base. This is over the weekend. I have a lot of interesting articles that I'm going to cover in this video series. Probably two videos with the Mid-East, mostly Syria in the first one, then Iran and Russia in the second, and then by the third I might be able to cover a little bit of what was going on with the Connecticut shootings. Not go too much into it because it's just being slammed down people's throats right now. I mean everything, just so much. It's like information overload. People are just, I don't even think they can take it anymore. It's like pure madness. But just hang in with me here, and I'm going to tie a lot of what's going on together. It says an Islamic faction of Syrian rebels captured an infantry base in the northern city of Aleppo. Its fighters said on Sunday. I'm not even going to finish up with that. That's just a loaded, nice little propaganda headline, opening paragraph to get the hook. But the thing is, they call them Islamists. They might as well just call them what they are, which is they're Al-Qaeda. The main group right now in charge is Al-Nusra, which is blowing up mosques. It's blowing up Christian churches. It's blowing up elementary schools, killing children, kidnapping civilians. And the Western powers know this. And it's my theory that they're going to actually arm the rebels with these chemical weapons and really just start to kick things off unless they get the regime change. But it's funny because they're really just Al-Qaeda, and that's what they are. But the media just says, ooh, an Islamist faction of the Syrian peaceful activists. But a good sign is I saw in the comments that not everybody was buying that. They don't understand what's going on there. They're like, oh, well, you know, I don't know what's worse. So, no water, power, cash, Syria rebels run broke town. And, of course, they cause it all. So, you know, they're coming in offering a solution after they cause the problem. And I covered this, on Friday, about how they're actually running out of food here in the beginning of the winter. See, ooh, anti-regime locals. See, that's the thing I found out, was that in Syria, no one's really totally for Assad, but they're not actually against him. So when they say anti-regime locals, they're talking about terrorists. They're not locals. They're actually foreigners from other countries. And many reports I've covered, the actual Syrian people that were peacefully protesting, say what? They say, well, we don't even understand what these people are saying because they don't speak our dialect, hence they're foreigners. So all these things that they're complaining about were provided prior to these foreign terrorists coming in. So they say there's no cash to keep the water or electricity running, so they come on sporadically. Prices have skyrocketed, long lines form at the bakery for miles around. And this is a decisive tactic I've talked about many times, about how they're trying to squeeze the Syrian people, like the Iranian people, to bend to their will, to the foreigners' will, as they carry out this invasion. So they try to get the people to lose support for their current government. And it sucks because once they do that, they really do lose their autonomy and sovereignty, because then you'll have globalists run a central bank type system. Then also you'll have foreign jihadists being given a non-secular state, basically an Islamic extremist state. Syria Prime Minister pays first visit to Aleppo since the start of arrest. The Prime Minister went to Aleppo on the top of a delegation to assess the hardships faced by the city due to criminal actions of terrorist gangs. Basic commodities like we talked about, bread and fuel, have become extremely expensive in Aleppo over the past few months as the fighting has damaged the city's economy. The U.S. and their regional allies, including the Saudi regime, Qatar, and Turkey, are trying to fuel the arrest. According to Damascus, global powers will keep pouring oil on the fire in Syria, says Hezbollah from December 17th. There's no compromise on Syria alone. The entire Middle East is at stake, and all the world powers have their interests there, Hezbollah's told RT. His current assessment is what they're seeing is the escalation of foreign involvement, and it's hard to accept that it's all being done to protect human rights and democracy. What they have in store for Syria could cause chaos across the Middle East. Different forces have drawn radicals and extremists into the fight, and they've been supporting and exploiting them. They assure their nations that they are fighting against terrorists, while here they are working hand in hand with the terrorists. He says the regime is still strong, but destructive consequences of the crisis have been felt throughout the country. Says it might move beyond Syria, saying the conflict in Syria has gone beyond simple domestic political dispute. You have the same tension in Lebanon, Iraq, Turkey, and Jordan. I've been covering that. Says the Gulf countries will not remain safe havens in case this conflict will spill over. I saw some other news about Bahrain. You have Kuwait, other countries as well that are starting to look a little unstable. So some more Arab Springs possibly coming up here, especially with this, the 100,000 Syrian refugees all around the country, outside the country. Italian technician and 2 Russian workers are kidnapped in Syria. They usually kidnap female reporters and just reporters in general. It says here the Russian embassy in Syria has officially confirmed that 2 Russian citizens have been kidnapped in the coastal city of Latakia. An Italian engineer has also been abducted, according to Italian officials. And this is, of course, by the Syrian rebels that the West is backing. NBC's chief foreign correspondent and bureau chief for the Middle East, along with his Turkish colleagues, who also went missing last week, along with Ukrainian journalist and writer, was abducted by soldiers of the Free Syrian Army. It says here, Syrian war fuels Christian flight from Middle East, something that I've already covered here. So it became a dangerous front line as the armed forces of Syria intervened in Lebanon's long, complex, and bitter civil war in the 1980s. It says a similar conflict in the 1860s. It was torched by besieging Druze and Turkish fighters after its Christian defenders were defeated. Yeah, so far the Christians didn't want to have anything to do with this. They're trying to stay neutral, probably from learning from past experiences, because they were targeted. That's why they didn't want to fight in this one. U.S. plans for possibility that Assad could lose control of chemical arms cache covered many, many times, but they're increasingly worried that Syrian weapons of mass destruction could fall in the hands of Islamist extremists, rogue generals, or uncontrollable factions. So they do have to have a serious concern for this, because their goal is to use these extremists, these terrorists, to get a regime change. But at the same time, once they do that, who's going to be the first ones to get these weapons? So. But like I said, that's part of the plan. Jerusalem concerned by Syria's chemical weapons. So when it says here that the U.S. is concerned about chemical weapons, really what they're saying is the Zionists in Israel are concerned about the chemical weapons. Syria's enemies may deliver chemical weapons to its militants, says the Syrian envoy. So he knows what's going on. He says here that the West, he's rejected Western claims that Damascus has plans to use these weapons against militants, or its people, adding that the government is concerned that the certain countries may deliver such weapons to the terrorists. Remember before I was talking about an article where they said they were going to be training them how to handle it, right? I.e. the U.S. and the West were going to train these terrorists on how to dismantle and make them safe against themselves. See? There's no logic there. So if you actually track what they're saying, it makes no sense whatsoever. So dismissing these allegations, the Syrian envoy added that the government is defending its people from terrorists backed by the well-known states at the forefront, which is the U.S. We're genuinely worried that Syria's enemies could provide chemical weapons to these armed groups and then claim they have been used by the Syrian government. Next up, of course, they can drag Iran into that too, and Hezbollah. Remember I was talking about that. Syrian jet fires rockets at Palestinian refugee camp in Damascus. A refugee camp in Damascus. Thousands flee and dozens fear dead after attack on the camp as Palestinians in Syria are caught up in the civil war. Oh, they're caught up in the civil war, huh? Well, let's see. November 1st, 2012, Syrian rebels or terrorists armed Palestinians against Assad. The Syrian rebels said on Wednesday that they had begun arming sympathetic Palestinians to fight the pro-Assad faction in Palestinian enclave in Damascus, a move that could fuel spiraling intra-Palestinian violence from November 1st, 2012. There you go. Syrian vice president says neither side can win militarily, urges historic settlement to end the civil war. Says here the vice president has remained quiet for the month's time. Like, I haven't heard of the prime minister at all recently, and it isn't clear if his comments reflect the sentiment of the rest of Assad's regime's leadership. So yeah, you had the prime minister going to Aleppo for the first time, so they're definitely concerned about what's going on here. Say it isn't clear how the rebels will react to a stalemate. Well, they don't want a stalemate. They want Assad gone. So that they're not going to do, I mean, because they're not really taking direct orders by the Brookings Institute, but that's the policy that they're following. That's the script. So they're going to keep fueling violence and using people as pawns till they get it. Public says U.S. does not have responsibility to act in Syria. Israel's support unchanged in wake of Gaza conflict. Go in there and check it out. Links will be posted in YouTube's video description. It says there continues to be a substantial opposition to sending arms to the anti-government forces in Syria, i.e. the terrorists. Why would you want to fund terrorists when you're supposedly losing all your rights and freedoms in order to fight the terrorists and Al-Qaeda? Again, flawed logic there. If you just pay attention, if you have an attention span that can go beyond 24 hours or beyond 24 seconds, you might actually be able to put the pieces together. UN contingency plan to deploy up to 10,000 peacekeepers in Syria. They're putting together a plan should the Security Council give the go-ahead for involvement in the nation. It says here, the problem is that they don't have any resources to spare. They would have to relocate some 115,000 peacekeepers. Russia says no blue helmets should enter Syria, saying there is neither peace in Syria for peacekeepers to keep nor truce for them to monitor. They also said that there is no clear separation line between the conflicting sides. To throw this in the mix, from November 16th of this year, the Pentagon said that they were mulling 75,000 troops might be needed to seize these chemical weapons in Syria. U.S. Navy pulls 2 aircraft carriers from Syria's shores that were sent back to the U.S. this week. It said in a move that the Obama regime thought would ease tensions but angered Turkish officials who had hoped for significant U.S. military presence. It was the Eisenhower, along with 2,500 Marines, for allegedly in preparation of potential military invasion. I don't think it was, though. Just like the UN, they're not going to do this. They just want to. It's all psychological warfare for Assad to just step down. Russia denies its switching support to Syrian rebels. The foreign ministry insists that top diplomats' claim of policy change was misinterpreted. See, this was an older article from the just last week, but again, it's a psy war that's going on. Iran president cancels Turkey visit amid Syria rift. They canceled a trip to Turkey after his military chief warned the deployment of NATO missiles along its border in Syria could lead to world war. So where do they go? Well, they go to Russia. It says here, Iranian official heads to Moscow for Syrian talks amid the escalating violence. Pretty interesting. Iran pushes election plan to end Syrian civil war. 6-point plan calls for immediate ceasefire and end to arms flow. They unveiled this 6-point plan during the opening of a new conference on the Syrian civil war. Like I said, I don't even know if it's a civil war, it's an invasion by foreigners, urging both sides to back a plan to end fighting and hold snap presidential elections. The plan is likely to be rejected by the U.S., which has insisted no plan involving Iran could ever be acceptable. Which really sucks because, we're just talking about how the vice president, was talking about stalemate. So the only way forward is peace, but they don't want it. Please join me in part 2. This is GGN and I'm Darko. Thank you.